Subscribe to Storylab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Call. Gregory Finley had been rebuilding a 1967 Mustang in his garage when his phone rang. 14 years in Delta Force had taught him to read silences, and the pause after his daughter answered told him everything before she spoke a word. "Dad?" Sophia's voice cracked like breaking glass. Greg set down his wrench, grease-stained fingers suddenly cold. 22 years of fatherhood had given him a database of his daughter's sounds, every laugh, every cry, every mood. This was new. This was ruin. "I'm here. Sweetheart, tell me." The story came in fragments. Barcelona. The Guerrero family who'd hosted her for the semester. Their wine cellar beneath the old stone house. 3 men, brothers Mateo and Diego Guerrero, and their cousin Javier Ramos. 3 hours that destroyed her. The police laughed. "Dad," they said, "American girls." They said, "I asked for it because I wore a tank top to dinner." Greg's jaw clenched so hard, he heard his teeth grind. His reflection in the Mustang's chrome showed a man transforming the easy smile of a Colorado mechanic shop owner vanishing, replaced by something older, something forged in Fallujah and Kandahar. "Listen to me carefully," he said, voice steady as a rifle sight. "You did nothing wrong. Nothing. Do you understand? I want to come home. You will. Tomorrow. I'm booking your flight right now." He pulled up his laptop with his free hand. "Sophia, I need you to write down everything you remember. Every detail. Names, addresses, what they said, what they looked like. Every single thing." "Why?" Greg stared at the Purple Heart mounted on his workshop wall, next to a photo of his team from 2007. Most of those men were dead now. He'd made promises over their bodies about what happened to men who harmed the innocent. "Because I'm going to fix this." After they hung up, Greg sat in the darkness of his garage for exactly 5 minutes. It was an old habit controlling the rage before it controlled him. Then he opened his laptop and began making calls. First was Brent Melton, who'd served with him in the unit and now ran a security consulting firm in Denver. "I need everything on a family in Barcelona, Guerrero, and a Javier Ramos." "Greg? That you?" "Man, it's been 3 years. My daughter, Brent." The line went silent. Then, "Give me 2 hours." Second call went to Daniel Hobbs, a former CIA analyst who owed Greg his life from an operation in Syria that never made any reports. "I need entry plans for Spain. Deep cover. And I need it clean." "How clean?" "Goes clean." "Done." The third call was to his ex-wife, Tricia Finley. They divorced 6 years ago. Delta Life had broken their marriage, but not their bond as Sophia's parents. "Greg? Do you know what time?" "Sophia was raped in Barcelona. 3 men, local police won't help." He heard something shatter on her end. A glass? Maybe. Or perhaps her world. Same as his. "What do we do?" Her voice was ice. "I'm bringing her home tomorrow. Then I'm going back." "Greg, I know what you're going to say. I know it's illegal. I know all of it, Trish. But you remember what I told you when Sophia was born? What I promised her while you were sleeping, and I held her in that hospital." Trish's breath caught. That anyone who heard her would disappear from the earth. 14 years in Delta. Never failed a mission. "I'm not starting now." A long pause. Then, "Don't get caught." "Never do." Chapter 2. Homecoming. Sophia's plane landed at Denver International at 6 a.m. Greg stood at arrivals holding a sign that said, "Welcome home, warrior," something he'd done every time she came back from college. Today, it felt like a lie. She emerged from customs looking like a ghost of herself. The bright, adventurous girl who'd left 3 months ago had been replaced by someone with hollow eyes and mechanical movements. She wore a baggy hoodie despite the Colorado summer heat. Greg didn't speak. He just opened his arms. Sophia collapsed into him, and the sobs that came were the kind that break fathers. He held her in the middle of that crowded terminal while travelers flowed around them like water around stone. His hand cupped the back of her head the way it had when she was little and had nightmares. "I've got you," he whispered. "I've got you now." Tricia was waiting at his house, their old house that he'd kept after the divorce because Sophia loved her childhood bedroom. She'd made breakfast nobody would eat and coffee they'd all need. They sat in the living room. Sophia, wrapped in a blanket despite the heat, told them everything. The details were clinical, mechanical, a defense mechanism Greg recognized from soldiers recounting firefights. The Guerrero family ran a prestigious homestay program. Old Spanish money, connections to local government. The father, Eduardo Guerrero, was a wine distributor. The mother, Carmen, taught at the university. Perfect hosts on paper. Their sons were different. Mateo, 26, worked in the family business entitled Arrogant. Used to getting what he wanted. Diego, 24, was worse, a history of incidents with other exchange students that had been quietly buried. Their cousin Javier Ramos, 28, had been dishonorably discharged from the Spanish military for conduct issues that Eduardo's money had sealed. It started at a dinner party, Sofia said, voice flat. They'd been drinking, making comments about American girls. I ignored it. Then Mateo said he wanted to show me their wine collection. It was supposed to be this big historical thing, bottles from the 1800s. Greg's fists clenched until his knuckles went white. The cellar door locked behind us. All three of them were there. I tried to run, but Diego grabbed me, and she stopped. Breathed. They took turns. 3 hours. When they were done, Mateo said, if I told anyone, his father would make sure I was deported and charged with theft. He said everyone would believe them over an American slut. Tricia had to leave the room. Greg heard her throwing up in the bathroom. I went to the police the next morning. Sofia continued. The officer laughed. He said I was in Eduardo Guerrero's house, accepted his hospitality, wore revealing clothing. He said Spanish men have passion and American girls should know what they're asking for. Then, he asked if I wanted to file a false report charge against myself. Names, Greg said quietly. I need the officer's name. Dad. Every name, Sofia. Everyone who failed you. I'm making a list. Over the next hour, they compiled everything. Addresses. Photos from Sofia's Instagram. The police station location. Eduardo Guerrero's business contacts. Carmen's university office. Every detail of the house layout Sofia could remember. Brent arrived around noon with a manila folder thick as a phone book. Jesus Christ, Greg, he said, looking at Sofia with heartbreak in his eyes. I'm so sorry, kid. The folder contained everything. The Guerreros owned a vineyard estate outside Barcelona worth 8 million euros. Eduardo had connections to local magistrates, the police commissioner, and several city council members. Mateo had 2 prior assault complaints that vanished. Diego had been expelled from university for assaulting a professor's daughter. Eduardo donated a new library wing. And it went away. Javier had been accused of assault in the military, plus 3 bar fights that resulted in serious injuries. They're untouchable, Brent said. Eduardo basically owns that part of Barcelona. Local cops are on his payroll. Judges owe him favors. Even if you got evidence, it'd disappear. Good, Greg said. Everyone looked at him. That means when they disappear, nobody will look too hard. Tricia closed her eyes. Brent nodded slowly. Sofia stared at her father with something between hope and horror. I'm flying out tomorrow, Greg continued. Daniel's setting up my cover wine importer from California looking to make connections in Spain. It'll get me into their world. Then what? Tricia asked. Greg's smile was colder than anything his family had ever seen from him. Then I remind them that American fathers have passion too. Chapter 3. The Ghost Returns. Barcelona's El Prat airport smelled like strong coffee and opportunity. Greg moved through customs with the easy confidence of a businessman, his cover story polished and backed by Daniel's meticulous work. James Morrison, owner of Morrison Wine Imports from Napa Valley, looking to expand into Spanish varietals. Credit cards, website, business history, all real enough to survive scrutiny. He took a cab to a hotel in the Gothic Quarter, checked in, then immediately left through a side exit. Old habits. Delta didn't teach you to trust the front door. The safe house Daniel had arranged was in Gracia, a neighborhood of narrow streets and old buildings where anonymity came easy. Third floor walk-up, paid in cash through shell companies. Untraceable. Greg unpacked his bags with military precision. Civilian clothes, laptop with encrypted VPN, burner phones, cash in 3 different currencies. In a small locked case, he'd checked under a false bottom in his luggage. Inside the case, lockpick set, listening devices, tactical knife, brass knuckles, zip ties, chloroform, and a miniature camera system. Nothing overtly military. Nothing that screamed soldier. just tools. His phone buzzed. Brent. Package delivered to locker 247 Sand Station. Greg took the metro across town. The locker contained a prepaid smartphone with Spanish SIM and a USB drive. The drive had everything: updated intelligence, property blueprints, vehicle registrations, daily schedules pulled from social media, and hacked emails, even the security company the Guerreros use for their estate. Mateo posted everything on Instagram: club photos, gym check-ins, business lunches. Diego was worse, treating social media like a diary. Javier barely used technology, but his probation officer records obtained by Daniel through methods Greg didn't ask about showed a pattern. Bar fights every Friday at a place called El Toro Negro in Barceloneta. Greg spent 3 days on reconnaissance. The Guerrero estate sat on a hillside overlooking vineyards, all stone and iron gates. Security cameras at entry points, but dated 2015 models Greg could bypass in his sleep. Eduardo left for his office downtown at 8 a.m. daily. Carmen taught Tuesday and Thursday mornings. The staff housekeeper, groundskeeper, chef all left by 7 p.m. Mateo worked at the family's distribution warehouse, but spent most afternoons at a gym in Ike-Sample, then hit clubs in El Born. Diego supposedly managed social media for the business, but mostly played video games and bothered women at cafes. Javier lived in a separate apartment in Pueblo Sec, surviving on family money and unemployment. On day 4, Greg made his first move. He showed up at Eduardo Guerrero's office building dressed in an expensive suit, carrying wine samples and a business card. The receptionist was skeptical until Greg dropped the name of a mutual contact, a wine distributor in Madrid whom Daniel had paid to make an introduction call. Ah yes, Mr. Morrison. Eduardo emerged from his office, all charm and white teeth. Mid-50s, expensive suit, the kind of handshake that tried too hard. California wines. We must discuss. They talked for an hour. Greg played his part perfectly: enthusiastic American businessman, impressed by Spanish wine culture, eager to learn from the masters. Eduardo ate it up, already calculating profit margins. You must come to our estate, Eduardo insisted. This weekend, we're having a small gathering, business associates, friends. You'll meet the real Barcelona wine community. I'd be honored. As Greg left, he passed a family photo on Eduardo's desk. Carmen, elegant and cold. The 2 sons flanking their father. And there, slightly apart, cousin Javier with dead shark eyes. Greg's hand twitched toward his pocket where the tactical knife rested. Not yet, not here. That night, he followed Javier to El Toro Negro. The bar was exactly as described: dark, loud, full of drunk men watching football and picking fights. Javier sat alone at the bar, drinking whiskey, staring at women like a predator selecting prey. Greg took a seat 3 stools down, ordered cerveza, watched. Javier went through 4 whiskeys in an hour, got progressively louder, grabbed a passing waitress hard enough to make her yelp. The bartender said something sharp in Catalan. Javier laughed and ordered another drink. Around midnight, Javier stumbled outside to smoke. Greg followed. The alley behind El Toro Negro was dark, stinking of piss and rotting garbage. Javier leaned against the wall, lit a cigarette, didn't notice Greg until he was 3 feet away. You need light? Javier slurred in English, probably assuming from Greg's appearance he was a tourist. No, Greg said quietly. I need you to answer a question. What? 3 months ago, American girl, Sophia Donnelly. Wine cellar. For just a second, Javier's drunk expression cleared. Recognition, then fear, then anger. I don't know what. Greg moved faster than drunk reflexes could track. His hand shot out, grabbed Javier's throat, and slammed him against the wall hard enough to crack mortar. The cigarette fell to the wet pavement. Let me be clearer, Greg said, voice pleasant, grip crushing. I know what you did. I know exactly what you did. And I want you to know something important. Javier clawed at Greg's hand, making choking sounds. I'm her father, and you're going to suffer. He released Javier, who collapsed coughing and gasping. Greg walked away calmly, hands in pockets, while Javier vomited into the gutter behind him. First message delivered. Now the real work began. Chapter 4. Infiltration. The Guerrero Estate's Saturday gathering was everything Eduardo had promised: prestigious guests, vintage wines, The Barcelona elite congratulating themselves under string lights in a manicured garden. Greg arrived in his rental Mercedes, playing James Morrison perfectly, impressed, grateful, slightly out of his depth among European sophistication. Mr. Morrison. Eduardo greeted him like an old friend, already calculating business opportunities. Come, come. You must try our 1982 Rioja. Magnificent year. Carmen Guerrero floated nearby in an expensive dress. All plastic smiles and empty conversation. She'd hosted dozens of exchange students over the years. Greg knew from his research. Knew about every complaint that had been buried. Knew what her sons were, and chose her reputation over justice. Mrs. Guerrero, Greg said warmly, shaking her hand while imagining it in a vice. Your home is stunning. You're too kind. Eduardo tells me you're interested in Spanish viticulture. Fascinated. The history, the tradition. Mateo materialized with Diego in tow, both dressed like club promoters, pretending to be businessmen. Mateo had the practiced charisma of someone who'd never heard no, while Diego had mean little eyes that kept drifting to female guests. The American wine guy, Mateo said in perfect English, probably practiced on dozens of exchange students before Sofia. Dad says you want to import our stuff to California? If the quality matches the reputation, Greg said, shaking hands and memorizing every detail. Mateo's weak grip, Diego's bitten fingernails. The way both of them stood too close, invading space as dominance display. Over wine and tapas, Greg worked the room. He laughed at Eduardo's stories, complimented Carmen's taste, discussed profit margins with Mateo while Diego lurked and stared at a young server Eduardo had hired for the evening. Around 10 p.m., Mateo got drunk enough to be honest. You want to see the real collection? He gestured toward the house with his wine glass. The special bottles? Dad keeps them in the cellar. Most guests don't get access. Greg's pulse didn't change. 14 years in Delta taught you to control biological responses. I'd be honored. They went through the main house, all old Spanish money and uncomfortable furniture, and down stone steps into the wine cellar. The temperature dropped 20 degrees. Bottles lined the walls in careful rows, some centuries old. This is where the magic happens, Mateo said, running his hand along a rack like he owned the world. Wine's older than your country, Morrison. History in every bottle. Greg looked around the cellar carefully. Stone walls. Heavy wooden door with an internal lock. Single bulb lighting. No windows. Exactly as Sophia had described. This was where they'd held her down. Impressive, Greg said, voice steady while rage burned white-hot in his chest. You must have shown this to many of your father's guests. Oh, yeah. Lots of people. Mateo grinned, and something ugly flickered in his expression. Especially the exchange students. Young girls love wine cellars. Very romantic. The tactical knife in Greg's pocket seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Not yet. I can imagine, Greg said. Though I hear American students can be difficult sometimes. Mateo's grin widened. Difficult at first, maybe. But they learn. He pulled out a bottle, examined the label. Had this one American girl, few months back. Very pretty, very prudish. Needed educating about Spanish culture. Education is important. Exactly. Mateo laughed. Diego and our cousin Javier helped teach her. Took a few hours, but she learned. Greg's hand closed around the knife handle. 3 seconds. That's all he'd need. Blade between ribs. Puncture the lung. Twist. Mateo would die choking on blood, while Greg asked about Sophia's screams. But Eduardo called from upstairs. Mateo, our guests. The moment passed. Mateo headed for the stairs, completely unaware how close he'd come to dying. Coming. He glanced back at Greg. You should come by the warehouse Monday. We'll talk business. Real business. Absolutely. Greg stayed in the cellar for 30 seconds after Mateo left. Photographed everything with his phone, memorized exits, planned scenarios. This was where it would end. Poetic justice demanded it. He rejoined the party, made excuses about jet lag, thanked Eduardo profusely, and left, drove back to the safe house. Sat in darkness for an hour until his hands stopped shaking. Then, he called Brent. I need more equipment. What kind? The kind that makes people talk. Chapter 5. The Weakness. Surveillance taught you everything about a person. Greg spent the next week becoming a shadow, learning the Guerrero family rhythms until he could predict their movements like clockwork. Eduardo, predictable, arrogant, believed his money made him invincible. Left his office at 6 p.m. daily. Stopped at his mistress's apartment in Sarria until 8 p.m., something Carmen either didn't know or didn't care about, then home. Weekends at the estate. Sundays at mass performative Catholicism while enabling rapists. Carmen, cold, calculating, more interested in reputation than truth. Taught gender studies at the university with spectacular hypocrisy. Had silenced at least 3 previous complaints about her sons through Eduardo's connections and her own academic influence. Mateo, the leader, the planner. Gym every afternoon, clubs every weekend. 3 different women currently on rotation, none aware of the others. Cocaine habit he thought was secret, but Instagram geotagging told the whole story. Diego, the weak link. Lived in his brother's shadow, desperate for approval. Spent most days alone, gaming in his room at the estate. Few friends. Social media showed depression markers, searches for validation, anger at women who rejected him. And Javier, the muscle. Since the alley encounter, he'd been jumpy, drinking more, looking over his shoulder. He knew someone was hunting him, but hadn't told the Guerrero's pride, or maybe fear of looking weak in front of his cousins. Greg chose Diego first. The weakest link breaks easiest. On Wednesday afternoon, while Mateo was at the gym and Eduardo was downtown, Greg approached Diego at a cafe in Gracia. The younger Guerrero sat alone, laptop open to some video game forum, looking miserable. Diego Guerrero, Greg said in Spanish. He'd been fluent since his Delta days in South America. Diego looked up, confused. Who are you? A friend of Javier's. Can we talk? That got attention. Diego closed his laptop. What about? Greg sat down uninvited. Javier's been acting strange lately. Paranoid. I'm worried about him. He mentioned something about an American girl. Diego's face went pale. I don't know what. Please. Greg's smile was friendly. Conspiratorial. We're all friends here. I know how these things work. Pretty American student, too much wine, things get misunderstood. Javier said there might be a problem. The lies came smooth as glass. Diego, desperate for someone to talk to, grabbed onto them like a lifeline. It wasn't my idea, he blurted. Mateo planned it. He always plans everything. The girl was asking for it anyway, the way she dressed. Of course, Greg soothed. But Javier thinks someone's asking questions. Maybe her family? Impossible. My father made sure. The police, the reports, everything's buried. Buried how? And Diego told him everything. The police commissioner was Eduardo's old university friend. The detective who dismissed Sophia's complaint had gotten his son a job in the wine business. The magistrate who'd refused to investigate had a gambling debt Eduardo had forgiven. A network of corruption as old as the family fortune. You're probably right, Greg said. I'm sure it's nothing. Javier worries too much. He left Diego there, drowning his anxiety in cerveza, and went back to the safe house. Recorded everything while it was fresh. Names, details, the whole conspiracy. That night, Brent's package arrived delivered by courier to a locker in Plaza Catalunya. Inside, enhanced interrogation equipment that wasn't technically illegal but wasn't for civilian use. Voice stress analyzer, industrial zip ties, medical-grade sedatives, and a taser that delivered enough voltage to incapacitate without leaving permanent marks. Plus, something special from Daniel. Comprehensive blackmail files on Police Commissioner Ramon Vidal, Detective Carlos Mendoza, and Magistrate Isabel Torres. Every corrupt act, every payoff, every skeleton meticulously documented. Insurance. Daniel's note read, in case you need to make them look the other way afterward. Greg assembled everything in the safe house's bedroom. Tested equipment. Reviewed plans. The operation was coming together, like his old mission's intelligence gathered. Targets identified, approach vectors mapped. He pulled up the family photo from Eduardo's office on his laptop. Stared at Mateo's arrogant smile, Diego's weak chin, Javier's dead eyes. His phone buzzed. Message from Sophia. How's the wine business? Code 4. How's the mission? Greg typed back. Excellent vintage this year. Very promising. Translation. On schedule. Target acquisition in progress. Three dots appeared as Sophia typed. Stopped, started again. Finally, I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart. Be home soon. He set the phone down and went back to his equipment. For Sophia, who'd never asked for any of this. For every girl before her that the Guerreros had destroyed and buried. For justice, when the system was bought and paid for. Friday night, Javier went to El Toro Negro again. Creatures of habit never learned. Greg watched from across the street. Waiting. Around 1 a.m., Javier stumbled out, drunk and alone, heading for his apartment 6 blocks away. Greg followed at a distance. Poblaci's streets were nearly empty this late, just occasional drunk tourists and working girls. Javier wove through narrow passages. Oblivious. 2 blocks from his apartment, Greg made his move. He came up behind Javier fast, taser to the kidney, 50,000 volts. Javier dropped like a stone. Greg caught him, propped him up like a drunk friend, and half-carried him to the van he'd rented that afternoon. Stolen plates, purchased with cash from a guy Brent knew who asked no questions. Inside the van, plastic sheeting, restraints, the interrogation equipment. Greg zip-tied Javier's wrists and ankles, duct-taped his mouth, and drove to an abandoned warehouse in Zona Franca that Daniel had scouted. No security, no cameras, scheduled for demolition next month. Javier woke up 20 minutes later, hanging from a ceiling pipe by his wrists, toes barely touching the concrete floor. His eyes went wide when he saw Greg standing there, in tactical gloves, face covered by a black mask. "Remember me?" Greg asked in Spanish. "From the alley?" Javier tried to scream through the duct tape. "Here's how this works. I ask questions. You answer. Lie. And things get worse. Understand?" Muffled sounds. Greg ripped off the duct tape. "Please, I don't know what." Sophia Donnelly. 3 months ago. Wine cellar. Start talking. And Javier did. Fear broke people faster than pain. And Greg had 14 years of experience making bad men afraid. He confirmed everything. Mateo's plan. How they'd lured her. What they'd done. The laughter afterward. Diego's suggestion to film it. Mateo said too risky. The police officer they'd called who'd made it disappear. "Where's the evidence?" Greg asked. "Photos, video?" "No. Nothing." Mateo said. "No evidence. Too dangerous." "You're lying." "I swear. Check my phone, my computer. Anything." "There's nothing." Greg believed him. Mateo was smart enough not to leave traces. But there was something else in Javier's eyes, another secret. Bigger fear. "What aren't you telling me?" "Nothing. I swear." Greg picked up the taser, let Javier see it. "There were others." Javier gasped. "Before your daughter. Other girls. Maybe 6, 7 over the years. Mateo keeps a trophy collection. At the estate, hidden in the cellar. Jewelry, phones, ID cards. Proof." Greg's blood went cold. "Where?" "Behind the wine racks. False panel in the stone wall. Combination lock. Mateo's birthday." There it was. The evidence that could bring them all down. Hidden like the crimes themselves. But Greg wasn't interested in courts that could be bought. He wanted something courts couldn't give. "Thank you for your honesty," Greg said. "You'll let me go?" "No." The taser's voltage was survivable, but agonizing. Greg used it precisely, targeting nerve clusters, making it last. Not for information anymore, they were past that. This was the beginning of payment for what they'd done to Sophia. For 3 hours in a wine cellar. For laughter while she cried. When Javier finally passed out from pain, Greg administered a sedative to keep him unconscious for hours. Left him zip-tied in the warehouse with a water bottle just out of reach. He'd eventually get free, but it would take time and hurt. The message was sent. The fear had started. Next, Mateo and Diego. Chapter 6. The Trophy Room. Breaking into the Guerrero estate took 3 hours of patient work. Greg waited until 2 a.m. when everyone slept. Bypassed the ancient security system, easier than expected. Eduardo relied on reputation more than actual protection and picked the lock on the wine cellar door. The cellar was exactly as he remembered. Stone walls, careful rows of bottles, the smell of earth and old wine. Greg moved through it with night vision goggles, counting racks until he found the one Javier had described. Behind the 1,960 seconds Burgundy collection, hidden in shadow, a slight gap in the stones. Greg pressed where Javier had indicated, and a panel popped open, revealing a combination lock. He entered Mateo's birthday March 15th. His social media posted about it every year like clockwork. The panel swung open. Inside was a metal box. Greg lifted it out, hands shaking with fury at what he might find. Phones. 7 of them, various models, all disabled but stored like trophies. ID cards. American, British, French, German. College IDs. Driver's licenses. Jewelry, bracelets, necklaces, earrings, all women's items. All proof. And a small notebook in Mateo's handwriting. Dates. Names. Details that made Greg's vision blur red. Sophia's entry was there. Clinical and monstrous. American, 22, stubborn at first. Cousin Javier very enthusiastic. 7 victims over 4 years. All exchange students. All buried by Eduardo's money and connections. Greg photographed everything with meticulous care. Then he took Sophia's items, her university ID, the small silver bracelet Tricia had given her for luck. Evidence for her. Proof that her father had found what they'd stolen. He considered taking everything, burning it, destroying the evidence. But that would alert them too soon. Instead, he photographed each item's placement, memorized the arrangement, and put everything back exactly as he found it. The panel locked. The security system re-engaged. Greg ghosted out of the estate like smoke, leaving no trace he'd ever been there. Back at the safe house, he sent the encrypted photos to Brent and Daniel. Insurance copies. He wrote, "If anything happens to me, these go to Interpol, FBI, State Department, and every major news outlet in Spain and the US." Daniel responded immediately, "Jesus Christ, Greg. This is bigger than your daughter. I know, but I'm finishing what I started." Sunday morning, Javier dragged himself to the Guerrero estate, bruised and terrified. Greg watched from a rental car down the road as Javier spoke urgently to Mateo in the garden. Even from a distance, their body language screamed panic. Mateo's face went through emotions. Disbelief, anger, fear, calculation. He grabbed Javier by the shirt, shook him, demanded details. Then he made a call, probably to Eduardo. Within hours, they'd changed security codes, added cameras, hired private security guards. The estate became a fortress. Good. Scared people make mistakes. That afternoon, Greg had a planned meeting with Mateo at the warehouse under his James Morrison cover. He arrived on time, professional, acting like he knew nothing. Mateo was different, distracted, paranoid, checking his phone constantly. 2 large men in suits lurked nearby. Obviously security. "Mr. Morrison," Mateo said, distracted. "I apologize, but we need to reschedule. Family emergency." "Of course. Everything all right?" "Fine. Just family business." Mateo's eyes kept darting around, looking for threats. "I'll call you." He wouldn't. The James Morrison cover was burned not because they suspected him specifically, but because they'd locked down all outside contact. The infiltration phase was over. Time for the endgame. Greg spent Monday preparing. He reviewed every detail of the plan, stress-tested every assumption, prepared for contingencies. Delta Force taught you that missions succeeded or failed in the preparation. Tuesday evening, he sat in the safe house and made a video recording on his encrypted phone. "My name is Gregory Finley. If you're watching this, something has gone wrong, and I'm either dead or captured. What follows is my testimony about a systematic pattern of sexual assault perpetrated by Mateo Guerrero, Diego Guerrero, and Javier Ramos against exchange students in Barcelona, Spain, enabled by their families' wealth and political connections." He detailed everything: evidence locations, police corruption, victim names, the trophy collection, clinical, factual. The kind of testimony that would survive legal scrutiny. "I came to Spain to seek justice for my daughter, Sophia Donnelly, who was assaulted by these men on June 15, 2025. The local authorities refused to investigate due to corruption and bribery. I am a father seeking justice when systems failed. Whatever happens next, these men must face consequences." He uploaded the video to Daniel's secure server with instructions. If Greg didn't check in every 48 hours, release everything. Then he called Sophia. "Hey, sweetheart. Just checking in. Dad, are you okay? You sound weird." "I'm fine. Just wanted to hear your voice. How are you doing?" A pause. "Better. Mom found me a good therapist. She specializes in what happened to me. It helps?" "Good. That's good." Greg closed his eyes. "Sophia, I want you to know something. Whatever happens, whatever you hear, I love you more than anything in this world." "Dad, you're scaring me." "Don't be scared. I promise you, everything's going to be okay. Justice is coming." "When are you coming home?" "Soon. Very soon." After they hung up, Greg sat in the darkness and thought about the mission ahead. In Delta, they called him Ghost because he was the one they sent for impossible extractions, for targets that couldn't officially exist. He'd never failed a mission. This would be the most important mission of his life. Wednesday night, the trap was ready. Time to make the Guerreros come to him. Chapter 7. The Lure. The anonymous email went out at 3 a.m. from an untraceable server, sent to Mateo, Diego, Eduardo, and Carmen simultaneously. "I know about the wine cellar. I know about the 7 girls. I have evidence. If you want it buried, come alone to Warehouse 7, Zona Franca, Thursday midnight. Tell anyone, and the photos go to the police, the press, and the U.S. Embassy. This is your only chance." Greg knew they'd come. Predators like the Guerreros believe they could control any situation, especially when cornered. They'd bring security, weapons, plans to intimidate or kill whoever was threatening them. He was counting on it. The abandoned warehouse in Zona Franca was perfect, isolated industrial area, no cameras, no witnesses, scheduled for demolition in 2 weeks. Greg had spent 2 days preparing it like a battlefield. Entry points mapped and rigged. Lighting controlled from a central panel. Positions marked for optimal sight lines. The building's infrastructure: old pipes, unstable catwalks, corroded supports, all cataloged and weaponized. At 11 p.m., Greg was in position on the second-floor catwalk, dressed in black tactical gear, face covered. He disabled his phone's GPS, left a final message for Brent: "If I don't call by sunrise, execute Protocol Omega," and settled into the familiar calm of pre-mission focus. 11:47 p.m., headlights appeared. 2 cars, Eduardo's Mercedes and a black SUV. They parked outside the warehouse, and 7 men emerged. Eduardo, Mateo, Diego, Javier, and 3 hired security muscle in suits with shoulder bulges that screamed concealed weapons. No Carmen. She'd chosen plausible deniability. Greg watched through night vision as they approached the warehouse entrance. Mateo went first, arrogant even now, with Eduardo close behind, looking angry and scared simultaneously. Diego hung back, practically vibrating with nervousness. Javier, still bruised from his warehouse encounter, moved like a beaten dog. The security spread out, professionally trained, experienced. This wasn't their first time handling family problems. They entered the warehouse main floor. Greg had left a single light on, illuminating a table in the center with a file folder placed carefully on top. Mateo approached the table. "Hello? Who's there?" Silence. "We came like you asked," Eduardo said, his voice echoing in the empty space. "Show yourself." Greg hit the switch. The single light went out. Emergency lighting kicked on red, disorienting, casting twisted shadows. "Welcome." Greg's voice boomed from speakers he'd rigged throughout the warehouse. Voice distorted, unrecognizable. "Mateo Guerrero. Diego Guerrero. Javier Ramos. Eduardo Guerrero. I know what you are." The security guards drew weapons, scanning for targets. Mateo grabbed the folder, opened it. Inside, photos of the trophy collection, printed in high resolution. His face went white. "Where did you get these?" "From your wine cellar. Behind the 1,960 seconds Burgundy collection. 7 victims, 7 lives destroyed. Sophia Donnelly was the last." Eduardo snatched the folder. "This is blackmail. Whatever you want. I don't want money." "Then, what?" "Justice." One of the guards fired at the speakers. The bullet sparked off metal, but didn't stop the voice. "You can't shoot what you can't see," Greg continued. "But I can see all of you. Eduardo, you enabled your sons. Paid off police, silenced victims, made sure monsters stayed free. Carmen too, though she was smart enough to stay home tonight. "This is insane," Eduardo shouted. "Mateo, you planned it. Selected victims. Kept trophies. 7 women remember your face when they can't sleep." Mateo spun in circles, looking for the source. "Show yourself, coward." "Diego, you participated. Weak little brother following orders, hurting people to feel strong." Diego made a small sound like a wounded animal. "And Javier, you were the muscle, the enforcer." "How did our conversation in the other warehouse feel?" "That was just the beginning." Javier backed toward the door. "We should leave." "Nobody leaves." Greg dropped the first smoke grenade from the catwalk. It exploded in white fog, filling the warehouse floor. The security guards shouted, trying to organize, but the smoke was military-grade thick, disorienting, laced with irritants. Through night vision, Greg watched chaos unfold. He dropped down from the catwalk on a rope he'd rigged, landed behind one guard, and hit him with the taser. The man went down hard. Second guard fired blindly. Bullets pinged off metal. Greg was already moving, a ghost in the smoke. He came up behind guard 2, tactical knife to the back of the knee, precise, disabling. The man screamed and collapsed. Third guard was smarter, had training. He'd pulled back to the entrance, guarding the Guerrero's escape route. Greg let him be for now. "What the hell is happening?" Eduardo shouted, coughing in the smoke. "You're learning what powerless feels like." Greg's voice echoed from new speakers. "What those 7 girls felt when you held them down. When you ignored their screams. When you bought their silence." Mateo pulled a gun from his jacket. Of course he'd brought one. Predators always feel naked without weapons. "Come out and fight." "You want to fight? Okay." Greg triggered the second phase. The unstable catwalk he'd partially cut through earlier groaned and collapsed with a thunderous crash. Metal and concrete rained down near where Mateo stood. He screamed and ran, dropping the gun. The smoke was clearing. Greg needed to move fast now. He circled through the shadows, using the warehouse's maze of old equipment and structural supports as cover. Javier stumbled into a prepared trap, a tripwire connected to a pipe that swung down and caught him across the chest, slamming him against a wall. He went down gasping, potentially cracked ribs. Diego ran for the exit. The third guard grabbed him. "Stay together. This is ghost work," Eduardo said, his voice shaking. "Military. Professional." Too late, understanding was dawning. But they still didn't know who. Greg appeared on a second intact catwalk, backlit by red emergency lights, face still masked. "You're right, Eduardo. 14 years, Delta Force. Never failed a mission. And Sophia Donnelly is my daughter." The silence that followed was absolute. Mateo found his voice first. "You're that American girl's father?" "Gregory Finley. Remember the name. It's the last one you'll hear." "Wait." Eduardo stepped forward, hands up. "This can be fixed. Money, compensation, we'll make a statement." "You think money fixes rape?" "It was a misunderstanding. Cultural differences." "Bullshit." Greg's roar echoed through the warehouse. 7 women. 7. You don't get to hide behind culture or misunderstanding. You're predators, and the system protected you. So, I came to do what the system wouldn't. The third guard raised his weapon. "Sir, we need to leave now." Greg shot out the light above them with a suppressed pistol he'd retrieved from his gear. Plunged into darkness. Only emergency strips remaining. The guard fired back, but Greg was already gone. Now came the hard part. Chapter 8. Judgment. In darkness, Gregory Finley became ghost again. The warehouse was his terrain now. Every inch mapped, every sound cataloged. The Guerreros stumbled through shadows, while he moved with precision born from 100 night operations. Diego broke first. He ran for a side door Greg had left deliberately unsecured a trap. The door opened to a small room Greg had prepared. Diego rushed in, and Greg slammed the door behind him, locked it from outside. "Let me out." Diego pounded on the metal. "Please. I'm sorry." Greg's voice came through a speaker in the room. "You're sorry you're caught, not sorry for what you did." Inside the room was a chair, zip ties, and a TV screen. Greg had left a tablet cued to Sophia's victim impact statement, the one she'd recorded for the Spanish police who'd laughed at her. "You're going to watch this," Greg said. "Every second. Then you'll understand what you did." Diego's screams faded as Greg moved on. The third guard was good military background, probably Spanish special forces, He'd gotten Eduardo, Mateo, and Javier to the relative safety of the warehouse office, an enclosed space with limited entry points. Greg could have rushed them, could have used flashbangs, could have gone full tactical assault. But that wasn't the plan. This wasn't about killing in the heat of combat. This was about making them understand. He approached the office door calmly. Knocked. "I know you're in there," he said. Voice normal now, not distorted. "And I know your guard is armed. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to talk. Just talk." "Why should we listen?" Mateo shouted from inside. "Because I have evidence of 7 assaults and the contacts to make it public everywhere that matters. Because I've already sent copies to journalists, police in 3 countries, and the U.S. Embassy. Because right now, your only choice is how bad this gets." A pause. Then, "Eduardo, what do you want?" "Open the door. Your guard can keep his gun. I'll stand where he can see me. I just want to talk." After a long moment, the door opened. The guard stood ready, weapon trained on Greg, who stood 10 feet away, hands visible and empty, mask removed now. Let them see his face. Let them see Sophia's eyes looking back at them. Eduardo, Mateo, and Javier stared at him. Recognition dawned. The friendly American wine importer. The father from Sophia's broken police report. The Delta Force operator who'd hunted them across Barcelona. "You?" Mateo whispered. "Me." Greg's face was carved from stone. "Surprised? You thought I'd let the Spanish police laugh at my daughter and do nothing? This is kidnapping. Assault. You'll go to prison. Maybe. But you'll go first. See, while I was playing wine importer, I was also gathering evidence. Real evidence. Your trophy collection, photographed and documented. Javier's confession, recorded. Diego's admission at that cafe. Police corruption, all traced and proven. It's already with people who can't be bribed." Eduardo's face went gray. "That's... you can't prove." Greg pulled out his phone, played Javier's warehouse confession. The voices were clear. Descriptions of the assaults, the victims, the cover-ups. "I can prove all of it. And I will, unless you agree to my terms." "What terms?" Eduardo's voice was barely a whisper. "First, you confess. All of you. Written, signed, witnessed. Detail every assault, every victim, every payoff." "That's insane." "Second, you pay restitution. The victims, all 7, get compensation. Real money. Enough to cover therapy, medical costs, life rebuilding. I'll manage the distribution anonymously." "How much?" €5 million. Total, divided fairly. Eduardo laughed bitterly. "And then what? You turn us in anyway?" "No." Greg's smile was colder than winter. "Then you turn yourselves in. Public confession. Full details. You allocate blame where it belongs. Mateo planned it. Diego participated. Javier enabled it. Eduardo and Carmen covered it up. We'd go to prison. Yes. That's called justice." Mateo stepped forward, rage in his eyes. "You can't make us." "I already have." Greg held up his phone again. "This conversation? Recorded. Your confession just now about the assaults? Recorded. Your guard holding me at gunpoint? Recorded. I have everything I need. The question is whether you do this with a shred of dignity, or I drag you through hell first." The guard shifted uncomfortably. This was above his pay grade. "And if we refuse?" Eduardo asked. "Then I release everything. The media gets it. The victims get it. The public gets it. Your family name becomes synonymous with rape and corruption. Your business collapses. Carmen loses her university position. And you still go to prison. But now you're famous for the worst reasons." "You bastard," Mateo hissed. "No. I'm a father. There's a difference." Javier, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. "What about the man in the alley? The warehouse? That was torture. That was Tuesday. And you're alive, aren't you? I could have killed you. Could have killed all of you. But I want you to live with what you did. I want you to spend years in prison thinking about those 7 women. I want you to understand that actions have consequences." Eduardo looked at his son, his nephew, the guard, calculating odds, looking for escapes. But Greg had closed every exit. "How do we know you'll keep your word? That you won't release the evidence anyway?" "You don't. You have to trust me. And I'm trustworthy, unlike you." I keep my promises. Like the promise I made to my daughter that I'd make this right. The silence stretched. Finally, Eduardo sagged like a puppet with cut strings. What exactly do you want us to do? Chapter 9. Ghosts Exit. Dawn broke over Barcelona as Gregory Finley walked out of the warehouse for the last time. Behind him, the Guerreros sat in that office, signing confessions under the watchful eye of Brent Melton, who'd flown in overnight as witness and legal observer. The confessions were detailed, damning, and ironclad. 7 victims named, 14 police and judicial officials identified as corrupt, dollar amounts of bribes specified. Everything needed to dismantle the entire network. It's done, Brent said quietly, joining Greg outside. They signed everything. Eduardo's already called his lawyer to arrange surrender. Should hit the news by afternoon. Greg nodded, watching the sun rise over the industrial district. Somewhere in the city, 7 women were waking up women who'd been told they didn't matter, that rich men were untouchable. Today, they'd learn different. The evidence packages? Greg asked. Delivered as instructed. Interpol, FBI, Spanish National Police, and State Department, plus copies to 3 major newspapers and 2 TV networks. Even if the Guerreros change their minds, it's out there. And the money? Transferred through the channels you set up. Anonymous donations to the 7 victims via a Swiss intermediary. They'll each get about 700,000 euros. Enough to rebuild. Greg closed his eyes. It wasn't enough money, never was. But it was something. Justice and restitution together. What about Diego? Brent asked. He's still locked in that room. Let him out now. He needs to see his family turning themselves in. Needs to understand that privilege ended. Brent went back inside. Greg heard Diego's door open, heard the young man's confused questions, then the devastating realization as his father explained what they'd done, what they'd signed. Diego's sobs echoed through the warehouse. Greg felt nothing but cold satisfaction. An hour later, Eduardo Guerrero walked into police headquarters with his sons and nephew, carrying signed confessions. The police tried to make it disappear. Commissioner Vidal personally intervened, but the media was already there, tipped off anonymously. Cameras caught everything. By noon, the story was everywhere. Barcelona wine dynasty confesses to years of sexual assault. The evidence Greg had gathered came out piece by piece. The trophy collection, the 7 victims, unnamed, protected, the police corruption, the judicial cover-ups. Spain erupted. Protests outside the Guerrero estate. Calls for investigations into Vidal and the magistrates. International condemnation. The U.S. Embassy issued a statement supporting American victims of crime abroad. Carmen Guerrero tried to distance herself, but her emails obtained through Daniel's cyber skills showed her active role in silencing victims. The university suspended her. Protesters demanded her resignation. The whole corrupt system began crumbling. Greg watched it from a cafe in Gracia, eating breakfast and reading Spanish newspapers. Mateo's arrogant face stared from the front page, now associated with shame instead of privilege. His phone rang. Daniel. Impressive work. Clean, documented, legally defensible. You didn't just get revenge, you burned down the entire network. That was the point. The Spanish authorities want to question you. James Morrison doesn't exist, but they figured out you were involved somehow. I'm leaving today. Already booked. And if they come after you, they won't. The evidence against the Guerreros is airtight without my testimony. I'm a footnote, and Spain doesn't want to admit a foreign father did what their justice system wouldn't. They'll focus on Vidal and the corrupt officials instead. Still, you might want to avoid Spain for a while. I wasn't planning on vacationing here again. Greg finished his coffee, paid cash, and walked to a different cafe to use their Wi-Fi. Logged into an anonymous email account and checked the message folder. 7 emails had arrived overnight, forwarded through multiple proxies to protect identities. All from women he'd never met but had fought for anyway. I don't know who you are, but thank you for making them pay. I thought nobody would ever believe me. You believed all of us. My parents said to forget and move on. You didn't forget. Justice felt impossible. You made it real. Thank you for not letting them get away with it. I can sleep now. First time in 2 years. You gave me my life back. Greg read each one twice. Let them sink in. This was what he'd fought for, not revenge, though revenge was sweet. Justice. Giving power back to the powerless. The seventh email was from Sophia. Dad, I saw the news. I know it was you. I don't know how you did it, but I know. Thank you. I love you. Come home safe. Greg deleted everything, wiped the browsing history, and left. At El Prat Airport. He passed through security as James Morrison won last time. The passport had already been flagged for destruction. Daniel would erase the identity completely within hours. Ghost had been a shadow, and shadows left no trail. On the plane, Greg ordered whiskey and watched Barcelona disappear below. 14 years in Delta, he'd seen justice and injustice in equal measure. Sometimes the system worked. Often it failed. When it failed the innocent, someone had to step in. He thought about Mateo, Diego, and Javier in holding cells, facing decades in Spanish prison. Thought about Eduardo's business collapsing, his reputation destroyed, his wife facing criminal charges. Thought about Commissioner Vidal and the corrupt officials being investigated, their careers ending in disgrace. But mostly, he thought about Sophia. About her voice on the phone getting stronger each day. About how she'd smile when he walked through the door. About how she'd really know that her father had kept his promise. The plane banked west, toward home, toward Colorado, toward Sophia. Gregory Finley closed his eyes and slept without dreams for the first time in months. Epilogue. 6 months later, the verdicts came down. Mateo Guerrero, 18 years for multiple counts of sexual assault, conspiracy, and evidence tampering. Diego Guerrero, 15 years, similar charges. Javier Ramos, 12 years. Eduardo Guerrero, 8 years for bribery, obstruction of justice, and accessory to sexual assault. Carmen Guerrero, 6 years for obstruction and conspiracy. Commissioner Vidal resigned and faced trial. Magistrate Torres was removed from the bench. Detective Mendoza fled Spain. Interpol issued a warrant. The 7 victims received their anonymous payments. 2 used it for therapy. 3 finished university. 1 started a non-profit for assault survivors. 1 invested it. 1 donated half to women's shelters in Barcelona. Sophia Donnelly graduated summa cum laude from college that spring. She gave a speech about resilience and justice that made national news. She never mentioned Barcelona specifically, but everyone knew. Gregory Finley attended graduation with Tricia. They sat together, proud and broken and healing. After the ceremony, Sophia hugged her father for 5 full minutes in the Colorado sunshine. "I never doubted you," she whispered. "Not once. I know. Sweetheart, I never doubted me either." That night, Greg returned to his garage and the 1967 Mustang he'd been rebuilding. He turned on the radio, picked up his tools, and got to work. The Purple Heart on the wall caught the light. 14 years in Delta Force. Never failed a mission, not even the most important one.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.